We've had members from the Public Utilities Commission here who said California law very clearly says consumers own that information, but a lot of people find it's difficult to get it from utilities. They're monopolies, they're trying to hold on to something that might be valuable. So what kind of access are you getting, Bill Weihl, from utilities to consumer data?
Well, as I said, we've partnered with about a dozen to date, mostly in the US, some in Europe and Canada.
Does that mean they're giving you all the data you want?
Yeah, absolutely. But there are a lot of utilities that are kind of holding back and are a little bit leery of it. I think they may see some potential business opportunity or way of monetizing that data someday in the future, and they don't want to give that up. They're worried about losing control of the data. But I think over time it will open up. It has to. That data, if you live in a house, that data is about your life, and it's something you should have control of, you should have access to. And accessing it only through your utility's website, isn't adequate. I mean, I could ask, but I won't bother how many people in here have been to their utility's website, and that might get a few hands. If I asked how many have been more than once, I'd be lucky to get one hand from a room this size. So, and you don't want to go to some special place to learn about this stuff. You want it to be integrated with the way you manage your life online. And I think, as Rob said, in the end, the more interventions required, the less people will use it. This stuff has to be automated. It has to be set and forget. It has to alert you when there's a problem, but not be something you have to watch all the time.
One member from the utility industry here, we were talking about this, why the utilities are sort of holding on to this data, which they may think is of value, said, well, I'd like to see Google give me my search data. Google has a bunch of data about people. That's not accessible to consumers. Could it be? Should it be?
We actually provide an enormous amount of data to people that in terms of any data they store with us. We make it easy for people to get it out. In terms of the search logs, you could have your browser keep the search logs easily. I would be very surprised to see anybody actually want to get that data. We make it possible for people to find out what information we do have about them, and they can delete that data. So one of the things we've actually paid a lot of attention to the last few years is trying to make sure that people aren't locked in because of the data being stuck in our systems, and once they put it there, they can't get it out. And make sure that people understand and can see what kind of data we collect about them so that if they're worried about privacy, they can understand that. So, I think that it's a reasonable question. The situation is a little different, and in fact, I think we've done much more from the point of view of making data accessible to people than utilities have.
Bill Weihl is a green energy czar at Google. We're discussing energy efficiency at Climate One of the Commonwealth Club. Rob Bernard, fair question. Also for Microsoft, if you're asking utilities to free up information, what are you doing to make it two-way transparency?
And now we're starting to get into, I think, one of the most interesting, evolving areas of all of our businesses in IT is where the privacy boundaries, where do they stop, where do they start, who owns the data, who doesn't. I mean, there's a proposed bill, I don't know if it's been passed, the ENO Act in Congress, which says consumers should have rights to certain types of information within a certain amount of time. There's certainly been a lot of controversy around issues of privacy and, like Facebook, for example, and other places. Where does this line stop and where does it start, and who owns which data? Right? And so the opportunity as well as the challenge is, how do you give people more control over what they want to open and what they don't want to open? I mean, we haven't talked about it yet, but the other thing to think about is calendaring information. Right? The thing I always talk about, why is it that my phone, it's not really a phone anymore, but my handheld computer knows that I'm sitting on this stage in this room, but yet probably my office and home don't. Right? How do we wire that information up? Who owns that information? We certainly could argue, well, I would think I would own it, but there are a lot of service providers between here and my home in Bainbridge Island that have to use that information if we're going to do the intelligent thing. So it's not just about the technology, it's also about what does the information flow look like in the future. And as these things evolve, I mean, these are all new areas for utility companies, for regulators, for IT companies, for startups, and this issue, and then when you cross international boundaries, it adds a whole nother level of challenge.